Yo, it's money, and just going over hidden knowledge, maneuvering these 9 to 5s, and just basic life lessons. And today let's talk about boomer men. Especially boomer men at the job. You know, um, I personally have nothing but respect and admiration for the boomer generation. You know, um, why is that? Well, my parents were boomers. You know, um, to be dealt a shit hand, and take it on the chin, I have respect for that. I don't think, people blame how the world is today on the boomers, and that's just not true. It's not true. I believe they are just the receipt of the invoice that was cashed in. They're just they're just find the terminology for this. They're that receipt that the invoice was cashed in. um they're just a product of something else that was before them. And they're not the same as the generation before them. And running into these boomers at the job sites, I have nothing but respect and admiration for them. And I noticed that when you stand your ground on your 2 feet and they notice that your boots are laced up, they have respect for you too. You know, not taking any shit at the job ties into that past video I did, protecting your peace at the job. But they will have respect for you for not taking any bullshit. Standing your ground and just being real. Not being a kiss ass, not kissing any ass. The boomers will have respect for you more than others. Boomer men at the job, I honestly don't have anything bad to say. They're part of the old guard. They're part of the old guard, Old Testament. You know, you can make a riff. You can make an Old Testament joke, some sort of riff on the Old Testament, and be like, yeah, I got this animal and it's been pissing me off. I think I might sacrifice it and give it up to the Most High. That might tickle a boomer. They're part of the old guard, part of the Old Testament. Make a riff on an Old Testament and it'll tickle them. You need boomers a part of your workforce. You need the old guard a part of your workforce. Not to say that it's all good. The boomers, they have that chaos mentality, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. I just recognize that they were dealt the shit hand. The world changed for boomers really fast. And I don't think boomers voted for, oh, here we go, politics. I don't think boomers voted for their world change. I don't think it was the elites. It wasn't boomers. It was not boomers at all. I don't think boomers voted for all of our car manufacturers to be moved overseas. I think boomers wanted to stay on those assembly lines. You know, especially boomer men, you know, boomers, they wanted to hold on to that assembly line mentality, you know, industrial revolution mentality, and the world changed and the carpet was ripped out from under their feet, you know? So I honestly, I don't feel bad for boomers. It's just, I know, I understand. You know, I understand boomer mentality. They wanted to stay on those assembly lines. And they're not here anymore. There are some, but it's not, it's not like how it was in the past, you know? You know, you could put your 25 years in at your company back in their day and get a pension, you know? And the whole Social Security thing, you know, oh, it's just the boomers ruined it for everybody. I don't believe that either. I think that was just the receipt. That was the product of that invoice that was turned in. You know, for millennials, as a millennial, I know I'm not going to get a pension. There's no such thing as pensions these days, and you're not going to spend, as a millennial, you're not going to work 25 years at one company. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And that's what we were taught, you know, in school. You know, elementary, middle, high school. As a millennial, you were taught, you put your 25 years in, retire. You know, I don't even know why they taught that. That was so outdated for my generation. It was just like, we got fucked too. You know, we were fucked. You know, I got this big ass school bus driving past, but you know, millennials were fucked too, just in a different way. Back to boomers. I love boomers, man. I love boomers. You know, I don't hate them, I love them. I have nothing but respect for them. You know, I shook a boomer's hand today. And honestly, he shook my hand. You know, because I wasn't taking any bullshit. Wasn't taking any bullshit. He could see the smile on my face. The thing with millennials and boomers, we're both smart asses. You know, millennials get that from their boomer parents. You know, like, because boomers, I think it started with the boomers. Their parents were smartasses, but in a different way. It's not the snarky. It's not even snarky. It's something else. Boomers had this smart ass press your button complex challenging the world. Because like I said, their world was changing fast, so they didn't know how to come at that. So they started being smartasses. You know, what's the terminology for that? It's not caring, but just being able to recognize that, oh shit, I don't have full control over this. Might as well poke fun at the shit. And I think it started with the boomers. You know, and that got passed on to the millennials. And it's funny because the boomers will be like, stop being a smartass. You know, but now as a millennial man, grown up adult millennial man, I don't get enough. I don't get that backlash from boomers anymore about being a smartass. We laugh about it now. You know, we laugh, we shake hands on it. We're both smartasses. You know, challenging, just challenging basic stuff. Using our brains. You know, finding the logic and stuff. Because people will bring up, and it happened to be a boomer. You know, he knew what he was doing. You know, he knew what he was doing. He was pressing bullshit. He knew it. That's why he shook my hand. You know, at the end of it, he shook my hand. He apologized. I apologized to him. We both smiled. We damn near hugged. You know, we know. You know, he's part of the old guard. You know, somebody higher, a little bit higher up at the job than you. Of course, he's the old guard. He's always going to have seniority. You know, he could just start there. He's a boomer. He's going to have that extra seniority over you, even though he's new there. He's not. This person I'm talking about, he's been there for years before I was there. But I've known this guy for a couple of years at the job, and, you know, he gave me my respect. He's like, no, you're like one of my top workers here. I know I am. I know. There's no reason to lie about these things. You know, liars we are not. You know, liars. For the old guard, they don't lie, they beat around the bush. You know, they'll press some bullshit about the job, and they know what they're doing. And I think in the back of their mind, they can't control it all the way. It's just how they were programmed. You know, it was how they were programmed. A little chaos. You know, it's seepage. You know, chaos seepage. It seeps out a little bit. I recognize that. It's okay. You know, boomer men. Boomers in general at the job. Boomer women. I think that's why I also, you know, understand and respect boomer men, is because I know what it was like for them to deal with boomer women. You know, boomer women point at boomer men and they just put everything on them. And that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. You know, boomer women will blame boomer men. You know, it's his fault. You know, he's making all these decisions, blah, blah, blah. And I have no control. And which, that's a lie. That's a lie. These boomer women, you know, pointing at boomer men and blaming them, it's not their fault. You know, you know, boomer women, I don't think they ever hit that enlightenment. You know, maybe some of them did, but for most of them, I don't think, you know, something, the boomer men and women both share something where they're kind of ignorant to certain social things. You know, because I think the social environment really changed for them. You know, it became more of a modern world for them, and they had to change. You know, they had to change. You know, boomers at the job I have nothing but respect and admiration for them. I don't really have anything bad to say. I don't have anything bad to say about them. You know, but they can come at you sideways, and that's what I'm saying. That they'll press some bullshit, and they know what they're doing. You know, boomers at the job site. Love them or hate them, you know. You need them. You do. You need them. These people are your parents' age. You know, they are your parents' age. You know, that is that generation. My dad is a boomer. My father is a boomer. You know, I understand their mentality. You know, I understand where they're coming from. I love it. I love boomers. I love boomers more than most generations, to be honest. Just because, like I said, I just know the things that they went through, you know, and it's funny. You know, I remember back in the day, they used to, you need to pull yourself up you need to get a job, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They try to make all these excuses. But, you know, as we get older and we talk to them, they're more forgiving. They're not even forgiving. It's just they recognize the fact that the carpet was pulled from underneath them and we were tricked, the millennials. The rug was pulled from under boomers just to trick millennials. You know, it was funny. It was like the rug was pulled under boomers, from under boomers, and then the world tried to trick the millennials into, no, the world is still the same as when there was boomers, and before them, the world was still the same. No, it wasn't. The world was not the same. That is a lie. I can't believe them. Why would the system lie about some shit like that? About the world not changing? You know, try to sweep it under the rug that was already pulled. You know, like there was no rug there. They just swept dust. They just swept dust into this pile with no rug to put over it. And just like, no, it's the same. It's the same. We just need somebody to clean this up. It's the same. No, it's not. Stop. It's not the same. You know. Yeah, boomers at the job. You know. Respect them. That's all you can do. You know, respect them. There's nothing you can do. You know, you're just going to make your life tougher going against a boomer at your job. It's pointless. It's pointless. Don't wage war with a boomer at your job. You're going to lose. You're going to lose. You're going to lose the war. You might win the battle. You're going to lose the war, though. You know, these boomers, they have seniority. You know, they have way with words sometimes where it's like, no. You know, this motherfucker's guilty. You know, like, they have a way with words. You know, but, you know, boomers also have, they also are risking their jobs too, you know. Coming down on bullshit, and because they can come at you the wrong way. And, you know, in the world, the higher ups at the job might not, you know, it might make them flinch. How boomers can be sometimes, you know. It can make the corporate world flinch. You know, because the boomers are so rough and raw sometimes that, you know, it can make the corporate world flinch. You know, and they know that. They know that. And they have to recognize that and make sure they're not crossing certain lines. Make sure they're not crossing certain lines. Boomers, I give it up to them. Like I said, they were dealt a shit hand, and they take it on the chin. You know, boomers do complain. They did complain, but it's not a whine. Millennials, we whine, we cry. Boomers, it's just more like, it's not complaining, it's something else. How they form words and sentences and describe certain things, it's very special for their generation, you know. I like it. It's rough, it's raw. You know, I like how boomers describe shit sometimes, you know. I'm like that because it's real. It's not fake. You know, most boomers aren't gonna give it anything fake to you, you know. They're not. Bullshit, yeah. They'll give you some bullshit. You know, but was it fake? No, it wasn't fake. It was a genuine concern. It was just came out as bullshit. You know, everybody should respect and have admiration for their boomer generation. You know, you'll get a lot farther in this world. You know, have respect for your boomers. Shake their hand. Tell them you see them. Tell them you respect them. You know, tell them you want them here. You know, put a smile on their face, you know. They need that. You know, even though they can bullshit sometimes. You know, respect your boomer, respect your boomer at your job. Boomers. Boomer men, boomer women. Respect them. You know, that's all you can do. Don't wage war against them. You're gonna lose. You're gonna win the battle, possibly, but you're definitely gonna lose that war. Because they know how to wage war. Boomers know how to wage a fucking war, and that's why I love them. You know, a boomer will take you arm in arm, stand next to you, and fucking die with you in battle. You know what I'm saying? A boomer will hold that, pick his fucking Bible up and his rifle, and fucking die for what he wants to stand for. Respect for my boomers. You know, a boomer, Old Testament, old guard. They can stand for something, you know, that's also the bad part. They could stand for something wrong and die on that corner, you know, but for most of the boomers out there that have their heads somewhat right, you know, family oriented, they'll pick up their Bible and pick up their rifle and die for what they believe in. You know? Fuck. How can you not respect that? Fuck, you get on the right side of a boomer? Man, these motherfuckers will go to the end of the world, you know? Like, no, this person was done wrong. Fuck that, you know? I love boomers, man. You know, especially a boomer that noticed that you were done wrong, you know, and you stood your ground, you had your boots laced. A boomer will come stand next to you and say, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm gonna die with you right here. Holy hell, I have nothing but respect for boomers, man. Give it up to them, man. You know, they also have knowledge. You know, you can also talk to your boomer at your job, and they will give you need to know the ins and outs of the job. Your boomer's there for you, man. You're genuinely concerned about your job and you have questions. Sometimes they'll give you a bullshit answer, but if you look them in their eye and you're like, hey, give me the real. What's the real? They're gonna give you the real. Like, okay, come here. They're gonna like, come step over to the side. You know, they can't speak the rough and the raw in front of everybody because it'll make them flinch. You know, if you want the rough and the raw about your job, the ins and outs, look your boomer in their eye and ask them, hey, give me the real. What's the real deal? What's the actual real? They'll take you to the side. Come here, youngin'. Let me tell you something. You know? Let me tell you something. It can open your eyes. And you'll be like, oh, I didn't know that. I did not. Thank you for telling me. You know, being aware of these things. Being aware of your fellow boomer. You know, being aware of the bullshit we all go through and the bullshit that we give sometimes. You know, being aware of being aware of we all give bullshit. You know, being aware of how we can shit talk sometimes, you know. Being a smart ass, being aware of how of a smart ass we are. That's the shit that millennials and boomers will laugh about, you know. We're all aware of how much of a smart ass we can actually be, and at the end of the day, we can shake hands and laugh about it, maybe even share beer. You know. That's some of my insight for today. Might have some more insight later for you guys. But yeah, have respect for your boomers, your boomer men, your boomer women. You know, they'll respect you. You know, and have nothing but respect for them personally. Um, yeah, maybe a little baby story time, but maybe I'll give you the story time later about the whole boomer thing. I actually gonna need more videos to actually properly discuss boomers. You know, it's not gonna be able to be squeezed into one video, you know. I'll go over more about boomers and fucking later videos. You know, you can only, there's so much information, you know, but I hope you learned something today. You know, it's money, talking about maneuvering these jobs and maneuvering these 9 to 5 jobs and just life lessons in general. You know, and I hope you learned something today. Peace.